I'm going to show you how to create prints using cyanotype. Cyanotype is essentially a formula that was created back in 1842 that develops when exposed to the sun, and we're going to be using that same exact original formula. When it gets exposed to the sun, it creates sort of a Prussian blue color on the surface, and anything that is protected from the sun, so if you place an object on the surface that leaves a shadow, that will be your print. So for example, with this card, I have this floral print, and this is what I laid on top to create a shadow. So when you remove it, none of that got exposed to the sun, so it leaves behind a print. You can do this method on all different surfaces, from paper, wood, leather, and more. It's a lot of fun. Let's get started. Items you'll find in your box include the Cyanotype sensitizer set, which you will use to make your surfaces light sensitive. Items to print on, including cards and envelopes, which colors may vary. 8.5 by 11 cardstock for creating frameable prints. And a canvas zip pouch. In addition, there will be a tray to help you develop your items, and then some acetate sheets which you can lay on your surfaces to print with to keep all of your materials flat. In addition, you will have a 8 by 10 frame to frame one of your prints. You will also need to find some things to print with. So I have here a selection of leaves and flowers, but you can print with different things, anything that you're really able to lay flat and creates an interesting shadow, which will end up being the silhouette of your print. So if you look at this example here, I had used these leaves, and basically anywhere the leaves created a shadow blocked the sun from exposing the background. So once I developed it, wherever the shadow was, that's where the color of the paper comes through. So you can keep that in mind when you're selecting your items, and you can play around with anything from leaves and flowers to lace, or even look into printing photo negatives. Here's a few other things you might want for your cyanotype printing. Some cardboard or scrap paper to help catch drips, some gloves just to protect your skin, and then something to stir with. I use a end of a brush, and then a foam brush to apply the cyanotype. In addition to the materials that you get in your box, you can also experiment with other surfaces. I've got a handkerchief here, a tea towel, and some ribbon. But cyanotype works on other surfaces too, including things like silk, wood, and leather, so you can really have fun experimenting. The first thing you want to do is prepare your sensitizer set. If you flip this to the back, you'll find all the instructions you need. You can also see how many uses you can get out of this particular set. So the first step will be actually filling each of these bottles with water and shaking them thoroughly. And it's recommended that you do this 24 hours ahead of your project for best results. So just a little tip there to try to do this ahead of time so that you can get really great saturated blue color. So I've added water to each of my bottles and shook them up and let them sit for about 24 hours. And now I'm going to go ahead and mix them into this vessel. So this part you want to do in subdued lighting. And you're just going to mix as much as you need for now. The solution, once mixed, is only stable for a handful of hours, so you want to be able to save the rest for other projects. So I'm just going to do equal parts. And I'm just going to stir this with the end of a paintbrush to blend it. And now it's ready to use. So now I'm going to coat my surfaces with the cyanotype solution. So I have a card and a piece of cardstock here, and a little something underneath to catch any drips. Again, I'm doing this in subdued lighting, so nothing prematurely develops. And I'm just going to do a light coat I want it to be good coverage, but I'm gonna try to avoid any puddles on the paper. And you can go all the way to the edge if you want. I'm just kind of doing a box in the middle. Now this is an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. Keep in mind that the frame is 8 by 10, and a lot of frames are, so if you want to cut it down for that frame, you can keep your composition in mind and where you paint the cyanotype solution in mind. So once I'm done coating these, I'm going to find an even darker place to let them dry so there's no risk of exposure. And you can do as many of these as you want and then set them aside in the dark. Next I'm going to do the canvas pouch, and the first thing I'm going to do is actually remove the leather because we don't want that to get anything on it, and you can just add it back on later. The canvas takes a little bit more work to get the cyanotype to really soak in, so you're going to have to be spend more time kind of getting it into the fabric. So I'm starting by painting it on, which you can do, or if you are willing to use up more of the cyanotype, you can actually submerge the whole thing. And that will get blue all over the surface, and even on the back if you expose it. So I'll show you that option as well. I'm going to start by pouring. You can see it kind of resists it, so we'll have to work it in a little bit. And I'm going to put some gloves on for this. One thing that the soaking or submerging is helpful with is really getting into all the pores of the canvas. But you still need to kind of take some time working it in. And if I have extra cyanotype left in this tray, I may dunk some ribbon or something in there. Keep in mind there's also this kind of gusset here that you'll want to get cyanotype in. Granted, if you don't print that part, it won't really be that noticeable. Flip that over. So you just keep going until you've covered the entire surface. And you, even with the canvas, might want to go over it a couple of times to make sure you really get in all of the pores of the fabric. And then let it sit in the dark until it's dry. So once your pieces are dry, you can go ahead and print on them. So I've gathered my acetate sheets and some leaves to print with, and I've got a good sunny spot. If you don't have really bright sun like I do, you can still print. You just need to expose for longer. And the exposure time can range from 3 to 30 minutes. So you kind of have to experiment with it, but one little trick is to look for the color to turn sort of bronze, and then you'll know that it's gotten a good amount of sun. So I'm going to go ahead and lay my leaves down on this card and then put the acetate on top. And this is to help keep them in place. If something's really flat, then you don't necessarily need to weigh it down with the sheets. But since these leaves kind of want to curl up, I'll get a better shadow or print if I press them down flat. If you have something that really pushes back up on the acetate more than this, you could always put weight on the corners, whether it's cans or books or something like that. Just make sure whatever you use to put weight on the corners isn't casting a shadow over your print. And so mine's already starting to change color. I've got really bright sun. So I think this is going to develop pretty quickly. But again, depending on how much sun you're getting, you can adjust your lighting time. And I just went with one little piece here to lay on top, but you could also arrange a lot of different elements. One recommendation I would have for that is just to do it out of the sun if you have a lot of pieces to play with, and it might take you a minute or two to kind of figure it out. You don't want it to start developing while you're arranging. But since this was just one simple branch, then I was able to just throw it on there and get printing. Okay, so this has been exposing for about 5 minutes, and because the sun is pretty intense, I think that's probably a good place to start rinsing. But I will say that if you're not sure, it's better to overexpose than underexpose. But I'm gonna go ahead and start rinsing this off. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and set up a mat here with a little water bath in the butcher tray so I can start rinsing this off. So this is cool water, and you should rinse for about 5 minutes. And I might need to change the water out every once in a while. And you can see sort of where it didn't develop this greenish color because it's just washing away the cyanotype from those areas. And there's some still on there right now, so I'm gonna flip it upside down to rinse it so it doesn't expose in the sun while I'm rinsing. So you can see it's getting to be that nice saturated blue with the crisp leaves. And you just keep rinsing for 5 minutes, and then you're gonna let it dry overnight or however long it takes. And one thing you may notice is the color may continue to darken and intensify as it dries. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and keep rinsing this out of the sun until I hit that 5 minutes. And here is my super fancy drawing setup. I've just got a pant hanger on a towel bar, and I just drape the cards over the bar, and this is actually right under the AC vent, so it's drying really quickly. So next I'm going to expose a canvas pouch. This is one I've done before. So I have my acetate and my leaves ready to go. Another thing I would do to prep if you're exposing both sides is to insert some cardboard or black cardstock in the middle, just to prevent any light from coming through. Okay, so I'm gonna let that expose. There's a bit of cloud cover now, so I'm gonna be letting this one sit much longer. In addition, with the canvas, sometimes I like to go longer anyway, just to get that color as saturated as possible, since the sort of texture of the fabric can come through sometimes, so the more exposure, the better. Okay, I've let this one sit in the sun for about 25 minutes. I chose to coat both sides with the cyanotype, so I'm going to go ahead and flip this one over to expose the other side so I get some color there as well. And you don't have to keep the leaves in place like I did, but I just wanted to move it over as quickly as possible without moving too much. So I'm gonna let this side sit so it gets exposed as well. And again, I put some black cardstock inside the pouch beforehand, so that hopefully that should prevent the sun cutting all the way through the fabric, which is already pretty thick, and just undoing any of the print we did on the other side. Okay, so this has been sitting in the sun for about 25 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and rinse it off. Got my tray filled with water. I'm going to need a lot more water with this than the paper items because I saturated the fabric with a lot more of the cyanotype solution. And I also have a little water to pour over top of this. So you can see a lot is coming off. So where with the paper I maybe changed out the water once, with this probably have to change it out a bunch of times. But I'm gonna at least get this started on camera, rinsing it off, and then I'll keep rinsing it in my sink at home here. And you can see how the leaves are starting to show up. I didn't end up printing this little flap here, which you're not really gonna see, but I think it was nice that I had Cyanotype here anyway because the kind of blue comes around the edges. All right, so I'm gonna keep rinsing this for a little while longer here, and I will show it to you when it's all done being rinsed and drying off. Now all my prints have dried, and you can see what the results look like when they're all done. I printed on the cards, the cardstock, zip pouches, and then I had a tea towel and a bandana to print as well, and some ribbon too. So it's a lot of fun. You can do a lot of surfaces. You can get a real range of results from the really deep Prussian blue to more of a denim look. So it's a lot of fun to experiment. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a lot of fun and continue to explore the cyanotype process. If you're posting any images of finished projects on Instagram, we would really love to see them. So please hashtag #papersource, and we'll see you again soon.